And also to add more perspective in terms of what is unfolding at the G7 summit and what is expected to happen when Prime Minister Narendra Modi meets with President Donald Trump. We're joined in our studio by India's former ambassador to the United States, Arun Singh. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining us on this broadcast in Wion. And let me begin by asking you this. There is a lot of anticipation ahead of this bilateral meeting between the Indian Prime Minister and the US President. Give us a sense of what could happen, because Trump has repeatedly said that he would like to mediate over the Kashmir issue.
There's bound to be anticipation because for India, the relationship with the US is one of the most important relationships if we look at our comprehensive national interest. The US is our largest trading partner, largest source of civilian technology, largest single country presence of Indian origin diaspora, host to the largest number of Indian students in US universities. Plus, whatever the US says and does has a global impact.
Right.
And so it is going to be important. So from that perspective, I think among the issues that are likely to come up are one, trade, because there has been certain amount of disagreement on trade-related issues between India and the US, and that has injected
we'll
some
talk
negativity.
About trade in just a bit, but I want you to dwell a bit more on this offer to mediate on the Kashmir issue. As an ambassador yourself, how does this work? Is it something that has been said off the cuff by Donald Trump, or do you think that there have been back-channel talks between India and the United States over this issue?
I'm confident that there's been no back-channel talk on this. I mean, based on my assessment, I don't have any special information, but based on my assessment of how India approaches the relationship with Pakistan or issues related to Kashmir, there couldn't be any kind of a back-channel talk to get the US to look at mediating, because India's firm position has been that there is no role for any third party. My own sense is that when President Trump was meeting Prime Minister Imran Khan, the briefing from his officials to him would have been that do not offer to mediate on Kashmir.
All right, but that may be the briefing given to Trump by his own officials. Now, India has, of course, rebuffed this offer by Trump. S. Jaishankar, India's foreign minister, of course, said that India does not look for mediation. This is a bilateral issue. He said this on the floor of the House in Indian Parliament. But despite that, Trump has said it again just a few days back before the G7 summit, where he said, I will be meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi and I will discuss the issue of Kashmir. How do you think Prime Minister Modi will be reacting?
Donald Trump is Donald Trump, and he has said things contrary to the briefings he has received. I don't rule out that if his officials said do not offer to mediate, he would have said, no, I'm going to do it, or at least to himself. Because I think there are two reasons why he's trying to give the kind of statements he's doing on Kashmir. One, he wants to incentivize Pakistan in a way to be more cooperative in the context of Afghanistan, because Donald Trump wants to pull US troops out of Afghanistan, and he thinks that will be helpful for him in his re-election bid next year. Now, if he is to pull out troops from Afghanistan fully or substantially, he needs cooperation from Pakistan to get a dialogue with the Taliban going. And so for that reason, he wants to incentivize them, and Pakistan will always play the card that if you really want us to do something on Afghanistan, we need to get something in the context of Kashmir, some kind of talk, some kind of mediation, because only then our political system will permit us to be more cooperative with you on Afghanistan. So that would be one dimension.
All right.
Second is Donald Trump has tried since he became president to show that he is different from other US presidents. He is able to handle things differently, do things differently, and that his approach is having a big impact, like he's claiming in the context of North Korea, contrary to the facts. And therefore, one can't rule out that he sees an opportunity in the context of India-Pakistan relations today to try and be active. You may recall that way back in 2008, President Obama, in an interview to Time magazine, had suggested that perhaps the US should play a role on Kashmir, on India-Pakistan issues, maybe a special envoy should be appointed. And there was a firm negative reaction from India, and then he backed off. He didn't do anything. So I think Trump is trying to see that what is his sort of equity in the global context today, and how can he maneuver around the India-Pakistan relations.
One other issue that I want you to weigh in on is that it's after a gap of 14 years that India has been invited to the G7 summit. The last time round it was back in the year 2005. But I also want you to give us a sense of, what exactly is the significance of G7 and why does it matter anyway?
When the G7 was formed and the first meeting took place in 1975, there was a lot of attention to it because it was a gathering of the major economies in the world. And even today, the G7 countries account for more than 60% of the global GDP. So they're important. But I think there's recognition since 2008 that the G7 is not enough.
Right.
And in 2008, the G20 was set up after the financial crisis. And many people and countries have argued that the G20 is more relevant in the global context today compared to the G7. So yes, to some extent, therefore, its significance has been reduced, and also because now there are huge differences within the G7.
Absolutely.
Between UK and its European partners, between the US and other countries who are part of the G7. So to that extent, its impact, significance has come down, but yet it remains important. It's a gathering of the largest economies, among the largest, because China is not there, which is a major economy. India is not there formally, which is a major economy. But that having been said, the G7 countries have from time to time done outreach events where we invited countries who are not part of G7 to signal that they are widening the dialogue. And I remember when Prime Minister Manmohan Singh had been invited, if I recall correctly, it was the G8 plus 5. Because at that time it was the G8 including Russia, and 5 developing countries, India, China, some others had been invited to show a dialogue between the developed and the major economies and others.
Absolutely.
At this time, I think Prime Minister Macron is signaling that he is inviting some countries beyond the G7, one, as they have emphasized, who support democratic values. And second, if you look at the countries invited other than Africa, it's South Africa, India, Australia and Chile. So really countries covering the Indian Ocean and the Pacific. So in the context of the enhanced focus in today's global situation on the Indo-Pacific region, looking at architectures of security, architectures of economic cooperation to deal with the consequences of a rising China. So again, I think it's a signal.
That's an interesting aspect that you have in fact brought about, that these countries that have been invited were not a part of the G7, Australia, India, and Chile. That aspect is something that we will discuss more. But thank you very much indeed, Ambassador, for joining us and getting us that perspective. So it is a pretty packed day ahead. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will, of course, be meeting with US President Donald Trump in roughly about a couple of hours from now. We'll be getting you the details as they emerge.